Loki is without a doubt carrying the MCU on its shoulders during this time of low quality Marvel films and television, and it only gets better with each episode. Episode 3, titled 1893, has us visit the Chicago World's Fair, witness Miss Minutes turn into a psycho stalker, and explore an interesting origin for the new version of He Who Remains, who I believe could end up being either the most noble or the most cold hearted version of Kang yet. The episode opens in Chicago in 1868 on the Sacred Timeline, meaning the past of the MCU as we've seen it so far. Ravonna Renslayer and Miss Minutes drop off a package into the window of a house where a young boy is making candles. When he opens it, it's the TVA manual written by Ouroboros, making this a young Victor Timely. As we know, the temporal loom still needs to be fixed, and General Doc's pruning all those branches didn't put enough of a dent into the issue, so Loki and Mobius track down Renslayer to 1893 Chicago during the World's Fair, also known as the Columbia Exposition. They won't only find Renslayer and Miss Minutes, but also an adult Victor Timely, who, using the knowledge he gained from the TVA manual, has built futuristic devices that reflect the technology of that era. What's important to note here is that the bulk of this episode takes place on a branch timeline, meaning that as soon as Renslayer gave young Victor the manual, it branched off into an entirely new timeline, whereas in the Sacred Timeline, also known as the past of the Infinity Saga and the Multiverse Saga, there's still a Victor Timely who grew up to be just a really smart candle maker. This is interesting because in the finale of Season 1, He Who Remains explained that all variants of him seem to come from the 31st century, and yet Victor is a child living in the mid-19th century. Miss Minutes mentioned that this was all part of his contingency plan, which implies that he may have taken a variant baby of himself and placed him in the 19th century. But why? If he was destined to become He Who Remains upon the death of the original, why put him in an environment where the technology can't keep up with his mind, and where he needs a TVA manual to understand time travel? It just seems like unnecessary extra steps to me, and personally, I find it less interesting than Kang's origin in the comics. In Marvel Comics, Kang, aka Nathaniel Richards, was more of an average guy from the 31st century. He wasn't really a genius or anything, but he did stumble upon his ancestor's lab, and using his ancestor's notes, he learned to use the technology and a time platform to travel through time and conquer. His motivation was that life in the 31st century was so boring and easy that he wanted to go back in time to experience adventure and glory, which personally I can relate to, versus Victor Timely, the boy genius, who was limited to the technology of his time until being handed a TVA manual. Also in the comics, Victor Timely was simply Kang from the future, going back to the past in the main Marvel universe and living there for a while. He wasn't an alternate universe Kang born in that era or placed there as an infant. In fact, there isn't a Kang native to the main Marvel universe because he was always a result of Nathaniel Richards, the father of Reed Richards, accidentally traveling to an alternate Earth, having a son, and through that lineage, Nathaniel Richards, aka Kang, is born in the 31st century of that alternate Earth. So for those who think he's descended from Reed Richards or even Doctor Doom, he isn't. Although he is distantly related to Reed through Nathaniel. Loki and Mobius show up at the World's Fair and start looking for clues of Renslayer's presence. They see a newspaper showing the ghost clock haunting the Midway, with the Midway being the carnival area of the fair. They also see a panorama for the Scandinavian pavilion showing Odin, Thor, and Balder. This is the MCU's first confirmation of Balder the Brave, who in the comics and in Norse mythology is one of Thor's brothers. In fact, it was rumored that Balder the Brave would make an appearance in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and concept art was even created with Daniel Craig rumored to fill the role. The rumor was confirmed by costume designers for the film, but the concept ended up being scrapped. So Renslayer, Loki, and Mobius all converge on the German Hall, where Victor Timely is giving his Temporal Marvels exhibition. Although the machine he presents is mostly smoke and mirrors, it's simply due to the fact that his genius is limited by the technology of his time, similar to Howard Stark.
I'm limited by the technology of my time.
He ends up being chased by Loki and Mobius, as well as some regretful buyers who had purchased faulty inventions from him. Sylvie also shows up to kill Victor, as it's her belief that no matter what, every version of him will attempt to rule the multiverse. But he escapes with Miss Minutes and Renslayer, the latter of whom Victor seems to be romantically interested in, but Renslayer sees Victor as simply a partner, which is a taboo word because, as he says,
I don't do partners.
Wanting to strike out on his own and be a solo act, and likely with some encouragement from Miss Minutes, Victor abandons Renslayer and flees to his lab in Wisconsin to gather his possessions with the belief that Miss Minutes will be taking him to the TVA. It's here that he gathers his life's work, an orb that I think is a prototype for the time ship that he uses in Quantumania. Unfortunately for Victor, he should not have abandoned Renslayer, because Miss Minutes, as it turns out, is obsessed with Victor, or rather the man that he could be. Her hope is that he, unlike the previous He Who Remains, will gift her a human body for her loyalty, which she can use to finally be his romantic partner. So she's a full-on crazy AI. But he makes her go away with a temp pad, only to now face Renslayer again, looking slightly ragged and brandishing an old-timey time stick, which does in fact work. Loki and Mobius show up, followed by Sylvie, which saves Victor from being pruned by Renslayer, but Sylvie still wants to kill him. So everyone is fighting over Victor. Loki and Mobius want Victor to come back to the TVA with them and fix the time loom, with Loki trying to convince Sylvie that he might not necessarily become another evil Kang variant. Sylvie, in the end, decides to spare Victor, and we find out that Renslayer just wanted power all along. So the episode ends with Victor going to the TVA, and Sylvie gives Renslayer the throne she always wanted by kicking her through a time door into the castle at the end of time, where the body of He Who Remains still lies. Renslayer still has her temp pad though, which she uses to summon Miss Minutes, and that seems like an enormous oversight. Because with the temp pad and with Miss Minutes, she should be able to escape, right? Unless you need He Who Remains temp pad to do so. But it seems like Miss Minutes and Renslayer both want revenge on Victor Timely now, and Miss Minutes tells Renslayer that she knows a secret about her. I'm guessing it relates to that recording that Loki listened to in episode 1, and it'll be revealed that the original He Who Remains also disliked his partnership with Renslayer and erased her memory. This was a great episode. I really enjoy when Marvel does period piece stuff, and it was cool to see the Chicago World's Fair represented. I really wasn't expecting that ending though, and it seems like Miss Minutes and Renslayer might be the actual villains of the series, and Victor might be the hero or maybe an ally of the heroes. Of course, it could turn out that Victor's demeanor has simply been a performance, or more than likely, once he gets to the TVA and witnesses all of time, he will seize control and become another Kang. Either way, I'm excited. This show has great pacing so far. I didn't even realize that we were already halfway through the series with this episode, which I think speaks to how well written and captivating each episode is. But you know my thoughts, let me know yours in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so that you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.